Okay, looks like we are live. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 8th installment of the past Facebook Live pop-up expert series. In this session, you'll be able to ask me questions about cool data warehouses or data vault modeling or database projects or SSIS or I don't know, anything that's SQL cool. Okay, so feel free to put your questions in the comment section below now. And as they appear, they'll come up on the screen. We were just talking about this kind of like it was the MTV in the 80s. Do you remember when they had the trivia music thing and they pop up the trivia on the screen with little bubbles? So that'll be the same thing. So go ahead and put your questions in. And just a little bit about me, I'm Leslie Weed. I'm kind of in the middle of the States right now. And I've been working with SQL for a very long time. Like cool data warehouses, that's the big thing, right? Cool data warehouse. All right, and I've been a past member for probably about 8 years, maybe. I started speaking about 6 years ago at SQL Saturdays. I never thought I'd speak at past Summit, so this last year was a real event for me. So welcome, everybody. It's great to see everybody. Hi, all you past members out there. Love to see you guys. I see lots of smiles out there. No, I don't really see you. All right. So we're ready for questions, Jed? Maybe, maybe not. Hopefully soon. Okay. All right. First question, how do I change my dimensional data warehouse to a data vault model? Okay, so really big question. When we talk about refactoring a data warehouse or any data model, right, any database, it could be a pretty hefty lift sometimes. So when we're really talking about changing what we're doing, usually if we have a good dimensional data model, what we'll end up doing is moving that over to a data mart because there's still probably value there. And we'll go ahead and redo our model in a data vault modeling technique, right? So lots of ways to do this. Because data vault really speaks to an agile methodology, I could do it in parallel or I could do it as those concepts go. But it's a really great opportunity to go back to your model, readdress things, really start from the beginning again, and work with your business as to the concepts of your data. One of the things that I don't think we practice very well is really working with our business and involving them when we are modeling something, because it's very important that we are modeling in the way they understand the business, right? And we're working together so that we do that in a similar way. So if I'm going to go ahead and switch over to a data vault, I might start at a point where maybe I'm trying to get new data in. Perfect opportunity to start moving that stuff over to data vault. We don't have to boil the ocean in order to make my model completely data vault, right? I can do it in bits and pieces, and that's the beauty about data vault. So lots of good stuff in there. For those that are new to data vault modeling technique, right? It's another technique besides dimensional or third normal, and there's lots of different methods out there. But data vault is a very cool technique, up and coming. So lots of good stuff there. I see we have a lot of people joining. Hi, everyone. Team is struggling with database projects. Okay, so I come across this quite a bit, and database projects is what I find in BI shops is we have a lot of BI developers that are new to source control. And this is usually, it's not database projects necessarily, but it's usually source control that is kind of a stumbling block for the teams. And so when working with database projects and your team, it's really important that you guys set up in a way that you're going to work the same way, right? You set up steps so that you're getting the latest every day. You know when to check stuff in. They know where to check stuff in. That methodology, that process is set by the team, right? So the whole team does things a similar way. Usually that's where the teams are struggling is more of the source control, right? It's not a native ability for BI developers as it is for app developers. App developers use it day in and day out, right? I mean, it's bread and butter for them. BI developers, it's often new. So source control is one of those things that really needs to be taught. And as a team, you guys need to come together and really make sure that you're behaving the same way with it. And that's going to be helpful. Don't assume people know how to use the tool. Work with them to make sure that you're all behaving the same way and working together. So that's a big piece with database projects. And what else do we have out there? Good questions. Come on. Cool data warehouses. What do you guys want to know? I want to do that little bleep, kind of like the old MTV. Here comes another one, right? What will it be? Curtain number 3, please. Bleep. That was my MTV music trivia. Where should I put business logic in the model? Oh, this is a good one. Okay, so I assume that quite a few of you have had instances out there with app developers where you're like, no, it needs to go in the database. No, it needs to go in the application code. And it depends, right? We try to keep that business logic in a place where it's going to be easily changeable, and can be handled very successfully. As far as change is important, and also keeping it encapsulated in a way that it's all in the same spot. So we don't want that business logic spread over, different places. So putting business logic in the model, a lot of times we got to understand, especially for the data warehouse, it's really important that we want to keep our data warehouse raw. So we want to keep that data warehouse as raw as possible without business logic prior to. We want to keep that business logic in the abstract layer. So the abstract layer is that piece that comes after our tables, right? It could be views, it could be stored procedures, something in between. We want to stay in control of our model. So that abstract layer is really a great place to put some of that business logic in the views, stored procedures. They might use tables from there to assist in some of that business logic, but applying that business logic should not be in your raw data vault model or your raw data warehouse. You can also do a business data vault model, right, where you have business logic either in your data marts separately or in a business data vault. So really being conscious of what's going to work. And of course, every scenario is slightly different. So you just really got to take that time to evaluate the situation, understand how much change it's going to require, who needs to change it, and how to expose that correctly is going to be very important. So good question. What else we got out there? Where do you recommend to learn about whether it makes sense to refactor? That is an excellent question. So, as data modelers, it's an art form, it's a practice, and it's something we should be practicing all the time, even if our data warehouse is baked up. So learning about whether we should refactor or not, really comes back to, are we practicing going back to, we might know what that customer concept is, but have we really practiced that lately? And if I'm going to go refactor, it's a great time to go over and say, hey, let me go ahead and at least do the conceptual model again of my data warehouse, see if I truly understand that. And now I can start to understand, if I'm refactoring, if I can do that in an agile manner, what that time is going to take, how much effort it's going to involve. Some of that has to do with how quick a time around does business expect to get it back? How much bandwidth do we have for those resources? So refactoring is really, that time and effort, understanding that model for estimating. And those are the big ones. If you've got a good abstract layer in there, it's going to make it easier. A lot of times people are afraid to refactor their data warehouse or their databases because they don't know who's touching the tables, or they don't know what's using that data. Very, very frustrating, right? Because that should not be the case. We need to keep in control of our models so that we have the flexibility to change things and to modify them and add them. So, and again, that comes back to that abstraction layer so that we don't have people touching directly to our models. So, whether it makes sense is going to be up to that, you really taking that conscious effort, talking to the business and seeing if that's going to make sense. If you have constant change in your data warehouse going on and you've always struggled with it, yeah, that might make sense to refactor. It might really make sense to say, dimensional does not make sense in my data warehouse. I really should go to a data vault so that I can deal with this change better every month. So that's a great one. All right, what else do we have for questions? I see a lot of good ones out there. Maybe we're having technical difficulties with our blurbs. Bloop, our questions that come up. What is the best practice to extract data from Data Vault model? Is it by creating a view or reporting table on top? Yes, those are definitely techniques you can do. I do like using views on top of the Data Vault tables. You know, one of the biggest complaints a lot of people will say is, hey, there's too many tables in Data Vault. I think as a database developer, that's a really poor complaint, right? When you understand, you know, the value of how you're separating out that data and using your platform to really make that data perform better, throwing views on there to help accelerate others that are not used to the model and how it works is a great way to expose that data, right? So views, and a lot of times we'll also have those data marts that are functional in nature. So we might have a production or a operations type data mart, and we might have a sales type data mart, right? So something that's more department specific that comes out of the Data Vault. So that's a great question. Thank you, Kevin. MTV, what is MTV? Some new database tool? MTV was the old music television station. For those of you that don't know, they used to have this little music trivia thing that they'd play, and so a music video would be playing, and I remember Sting, and they'd have these little bloops, and then the trivia would show up, and bloop, the trivia would show up. Maybe we should create a new tool. What do you recommend for documenting existing SQL Server databases data model? Okay, so this is a good one. So it depends on what you mean by documenting, right? So if we're talking about just the metadata, the DDL, right? Database projects, right? If you guys are working with SQL Server, you should be using database projects, right? That's documenting our meta, our DDL information, all the objects and version control of those objects and the source control, source safe, old tool, sorry, store procedures, etc. So all those objects, right? We really should be using database projects. Now, if we're talking about something a little bit more formal, if we're talking about the data flow or something like that, there's a lot of different ways to document, and a lot of vendors have products out there that will do this. One of the things about Data Vault that we use is we have a record source column, right? And that record source column that is used on every table, it's one of the audit fields, one of the Hoodoo fields, right? So record source column, what you can do in that record source column is you can really fill that with JSON. So you can really include a lot of information, whether it be data and source information, and then from that JSON you can actually pull it out and create documentation for it, right? You create documentation from that record source information about where things are flowing, where it's coming from. You could do, you know, original server and database column name in that. So a lot of power with a record source field if you want to do some of that, you know, and do some custom documentation on that. So that's one way. And then, of course, there's a lot of vendors that do have tools out there. It just depends on what level of documentation you need. I tend to find that, you know, we always create documentation, nobody reads it. So you really do want to make it valuable. Of course, I think database projects, as far as truly being that source and that documentation of what's going on over time with the history, you got to do it. Database projects, you got to do it. All right. So great question. Thank you, Chuck. All right. Anything else? After the design is decided, can implementation of Data Vault be automated for instance creation of database entities like tables, stored procedures, indexes? Okay. So you could, yes. Obviously, so one of the things that we have out there is BIML, right? So because Data Vault is very pattern-based, BIML works very well to do some auto creation for ETL. So you could create probably some dynamic script stuff to create the tables and stored procedures and indexes also. If you know some of that ahead of time, right? So one of the things that's interesting about Data Vault is because it's agile in nature, we usually are not like we don't know everything about the data to start off with. We might be working in chunks and pieces and concepts. So we might not be prepared to actually create a whole bunch of it. It might not make sense to spend the time to create some dynamic SQL to create all these entities and tables and sort procedures because we don't know what they're all going to be. And maybe we're just working on a concept and it's just easier to create it, do some copy changes and just get it out there. So you could, you don't have to, right? It just depends on the situation. If you know enough about the data and it's large enough and you can do it, I would definitely spend the time doing some dynamic SQL to at least get you 95% of the way there. I mean, definitely easy to do. Macros, right? You can do some macros too within SSMS and some of the tools available. All right. Thank you. Good question. Anything good in SQL Server 2019 that you look forward to? All right, so you guys are all going to think I'm nuts. But there's this little thing coming out in 2019 that is an improvement to an error message. And it's an improvement to the truncation error message. So for those of you that have done a lot of SSIS and you would do insert statements, right? And you get the truncate, you can't insert, truncation failure, right? Well, I think this is way overdue, but they finally are putting in what column is failing. So I see many, 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 many hours saved for lots of people out there on this error message. So I think this is fantastic that we have this new improved error message. I'd like to take that Microsoft engineer out for drinks. Please respond to me. Thank you. Thank you so much for doing that. My favorite thing in 2019. No, there's lots of cool stuff coming out in 2019, containers and Kubernetes and off the charts, fantastic technology stuff. But I'll tell you what, that error message, exciting. It has made, I'm so excited. 2019, awesome. Okay. Anything else? What are common mistakes made by people implementing Data Vault for the first time? Well, everybody makes mistakes. That's the beauty about Data Vault, right? So it doesn't even have to be the first time, right? I can still go make a model and go make mistakes with it. But it's recoverable. It's easy to modify after your mistakes. You've stored the data, and maybe let's say I decided to put some stuff in the satellite table, which is attribute data. But it shouldn't be attribute data. It really needs to be in my hub table. It really is a key. It's an identifier, what we're calling an ensemble identifier now, or business key or something like that. That should really be in a hub table. Well, I still have the data, so I can change my model and move that data over appropriately and still fix it. Super easy to do. It is easy to do. So I think even as you make mistakes, that's where we learn, like we're learning where we should be doing things differently. So common mistakes, keys are always sometimes can be really hard, okay? As we start to go into 2019 and do some new sessions this year, we're really going to talk about identifying what's the property key or identifier to use for those hubs when you have multiple sources coming in, because those can be a little difficult to determine which ones you want to use, because we have keys coming in from multiple sources that they could be they mean the same thing, but I could have different, one could be 3 columns composite key and one could be 5 columns composite key. So understanding how to really get that in, that's probably the toughest one and where people make the most mistakes. Good question. Anything else? Bloop. What advice would you give for anyone just starting out on their career? Follow what you love to do. You know, I think that doors open up when you realize what you like. You know, when I wrote my first stored procedure, I knew I wanted to go database. I was doing application work before that, right? Application dev work. And I wrote my first stored procedure. I'm like, oh, databases are cool. So that completely changed my career trajectory. So really pay attention to the things you like to do, right? That's really, really important. Obviously, being a part of PASS in the community and things you can learn here and networking with people that you can reach out to and ask questions of, right? Like if I have an index question, right, I'm going to go talk to some of the DBAs I've met and go, what am I doing wrong with this index? Great opportunity within PASS to do some of that learning and understanding, and so much to know, right? There's so many different paths you can take it within out your career. So, stay involved, go to your SQL Saturdays, be a part of that community. Sometimes you don't know where your career can go until you start doing that. So that's what I suggest. Get involved, meet people and understand what type of jobs are out there. Very important. Good question. What do I see as the biggest challenge for you as a data professional? Biggest challenge. So there's always new technology out there, right? I think as a data professional and any IT professional, right, we're constantly having to learn. And that's just the nature of the job, right? I think we all know that. We're constantly having to learn new technologies. It can be a challenge to do that, right? It can be a challenge to stay up with all the technologies because there's so many. Navigating through the hype and the words and the marketing words and getting to understand really where does it fit in the architecture as a whole piece, that can be tough sometimes, right? We try to get hands-on with some of this technology and really understand what it's doing and seeing if the marketing terms are really up to par or not. So that can be super challenging because there's so much out there. Yep. Good question. Somebody was prepared with lots of questions, I see. How are we doing on time? I could talk about database projects. Anybody have database project questions? SSIS? Cool data warehouses? How would you recommend building my network? Okay. Well, definitely get involved with your local users group. Okay, so hopefully you've got a local users group. There's lots of virtual groups. I host the virtual performance virtual group. There's women's in technology group. There's tons of virtual groups, right? So if you haven't been on pass.org, get on pass.org. You can go see all the different virtual groups. Just sign up. They'll send you out when they're meeting. Those webinars, and the webinars are usually recorded, so there's a lot of history to go to. Get involved, volunteer for your local SQL Saturdays. And if you're interested in presenting, there's a lot of help out there to help new presenters. So definitely do that. So lots of different ways to build your network. Okay. What integration tool, platform methodology do you suggest is better with Data Vault? Tool, platform, and methodology. Wow. Those are all three big things and totally different, right? So Data Vault's a modeling concept, right? It works for any relational database, right? Oracle, SQL Server, all the other ones. So it's the same concept. What you can do, though, is make the model yours by using techniques of your platform, things that are unique with your platform, to make that modeling technique yours, right? So using the temporary tables where it makes sense, maybe on the SAT tables where you have changes a lot. So lots of options there. Platform is going to be, obviously it's shop dependent, right? There's really... it's a modeling technique, so it doesn't matter what the platform is. It's just you might have different flavors of how you actually do the rules of your modeling to apply it. And then, so integration methodology. So now, as we go back to Data Vault, let's talk about a couple of things. So, Data Vault and any modeling technique that you're going to use, dimensional or whether it be third normal form, the important thing here is that you have rules, right? You're going to have rules, you're going to have naming conventions, and you agree upon that with your team of how those things are going to be. So if I asked 10 people to go away and model something, didn't set how it was going to be done, I'm going to have 10 different types of models come back. Now, if I say, okay, we're going to do Data Vault, this is what our naming conventions are going to be. This is how we're going to set up our tables. These are going to be our fields, and these are going to be our required fields in each one. And we're going to have this type of methodology on it. Those 10 are going to come back with pretty similar models, right? I'm not going to have as much variation on that. So it's really important that we have rules in our modeling technique as we go out there. So, you know, anybody coming in new to the data warehouse team, you know, they can get those rules established and understand what they are and go with it, right? Like, it's very important when you go into a new situation, you're not building a monster out of a data warehouse by saying, oh, it's already dimensional, I'm going to go ahead and throw some third normal form tables in there. We really want to follow the concept that's in there, right? We follow the rules that are in there. So good question, lots of different ways, right? It's up to you to make it yours. Top 5 database project tips. All right, top 5 database project tips. Top 5 database project tips. Be careful. When you are doing synonyms and references, so you've got more than one database in your solution, you know, be careful how you're going to set that stuff up, because you can create kind of an issue with your references. It can be kind of a nightmare. So circular references are a no-no. If you don't know about them, understand them so that you're not creating those in your databases so that your database projects will work successfully. There is a workaround. It's a little tough to do. It's kind of a pain. But just be aware what they are so that way you can do best practices. Second database project tips. So let's see. Make sure you're organizing by schema, right? If you're organizing your stuff by schema and using schemas, I hope everybody out there is using schemas. Great way to organize your database, your tables, all that good stuff. So that way your unit of work, how you're working is, you know, following a process, a methodology. So make sure you organize that stuff by schema. That's super helpful. That's the way I prefer. Another database project tip is I can have multiple database projects out there with the same database if I'm doing something different. I might have a DBA with the project, but they're going to store permissions and role level memberships and those type of things, right? That's what they're doing with it. I can have a development version of that database project where I'm not going to store permissions. I'm not going to store some of the database settings, right? I'm just concerned about storing and versioning my tables and my store procedures and those objects, right? So you can have a different methods of the database project. Just make sure you know what you're doing. Perfect way to do it. What else about database projects? Make sure you're always getting the latest. Not really a database project tip. That's more of source control. Make sure you're getting the latest. Top one, Daniel, I forgot to mention top one, right? When you do your schema compare and you are adding objects to your database project, always make sure it's error-free before you check in, okay? Big one, make sure it's error-free. So good database tip. Database project tip. Make sure your team is doing that. That should be part of their process. All right, just a few minutes left, guys. Any more? Okay, it looks like we're going to wrap it up. I guess it's time. So want to thank everybody for coming. Thank you for the live pop-up session. Pass, thank you for inviting me. So great questions today. Also, just a reminder, there's a lot of amazing future events coming up. I know February 17th, there's a big streaming event with a couple of architecture data management streams. That's going to be a good one. You can find that on pass.org. If you're not a member of PASS already, you should be. That'd be great. So February 7th, yes, that expert series is February 7th. So make sure you join pass.org. Best place to connect and share and learn with other professionals in the data community. And it's no cost to join. So thank you everybody for joining today. Really appreciate it. And hope to see you at Summit this year. If you haven't planned yet, hope to see you at Summit. Okay. Thanks much, all.